Before we talk about narcissistic behavior, we need to clear a dangerous misconception. Narcissism is not just confidence, charm, or self love. It is a pattern of relating that quietly destabilizes everyone involved. Many people spend years confused, exhausted, and self doubting, not because they are weak, but because they are trying to make sense of a system that was never meant to make sense. Narcissistic behavior does not announce itself clearly. It reveals itself slowly through repeated moments that leave you questioning your memory, your emotions, and your worth. You keep asking what went wrong, what you could have done differently, why communication never seems to work, and in that confusion, the real issue remains hidden. Today, we are going to name what is usually minimized, dismissed, or normalized. The most harmful narcissistic behaviors are not about ego. They are about control, avoidance, and emotional power. Once you understand these behaviors, you stop personalizing the damage and start seeing the pattern. And when the pattern becomes visible, clarity replaces confusion and self-trust begins to return. Narcissistic behavior is often misunderstood as extreme confidence, but in reality, it is rooted in entitlement. Confidence is stable, it does not need constant validation, and it does not collapse when challenged. Entitlement, on the other hand, is fragile, loud, and demanding. A narcissistic individual does not believe they are good enough. They believe they are owed special treatment without accountability. This is why their reactions feel disproportionate, because entitlement is not about self-trust. It is about expectation. When someone is truly confident, they can tolerate disagreement, disappointment, and feedback. A narcissistic person cannot, because their internal sense of self is not solid. Entitlement becomes a defense against deep insecurity. They expect admiration, compliance, loyalty, and emotional labor from others simply because they exist. This expectation is rarely spoken directly, but it governs every interaction. When it is not met, the response is rage, withdrawal, punishment, or devaluation. This entitlement shows up in subtle, everyday ways. They expect you to understand their needs without asking, but dismiss yours as inconvenient. They believe their stress excuses their behavior, but your stress is an annoyance. They expect forgiveness without change, access without respect, and loyalty without safety. These expectations are not negotiated, they are assumed. And when reality does not align with them, the narcissist experiences it as an injustice. What makes this especially damaging is that entitlement is paired with zero responsibility. The narcissist believes rules apply to others, not to them. If they hurt you, it was justified. If you hurt them, it is unforgivable. This double standard keeps them in a position of moral superiority even when their behavior is clearly harmful. Entitlement allows them to bypass empathy because they see their needs as more important than anyone else's emotional reality. Over time, people around narcissists begin to shrink. They over-explain, overgive, and self-abandon, trying to meet unspoken expectations that constantly shift. This is how entitlement erodes relationships. It is not just selfishness, it is a worldview where the narcissist is always centered and others exist to support, regulate, and affirm them. Entitlement also explains why narcissists struggle so deeply with boundaries. A boundary challenges the belief that they deserve unrestricted access to you. Saying no feels like rejection, disrespect, or betrayal because it disrupts their assumed privilege. This is why boundaries are met with guilt, trips, anger, or silent treatment rather than understanding. Understanding that narcissism is driven by entitlement rather than confidence is critical because it removes the illusion that they are emotionally strong. They are not. Their behavior is powered by fear of inadequacy, masked by grandiosity. And once you see that the problem is not your failure to give enough, but their belief that they deserve more than anyone else without earning it through care, consistency, or accountability. Lack of accountability is one of the clearest and most destructive narcissistic patterns because it quietly dismantles trust while appearing reasonable on the surface. A narcissistic individual does not experience accountability as growth or repair. They experience it as an attack on their identity. Being wrong threatens the carefully constructed self-image they rely on to feel stable. So instead of reflecting, they defend. When harm is brought to their attention, the response is rarely curiosity or concern. It is deflection, denial, or counter-accusation. The conversation shifts from what they did to how you said it or why you are overreacting. This tactic keeps them from ever sitting with the impact of their behavior. Accountability would require empathy, humility, and responsibility qualities that feel intolerable to someone whose self-worth depends on being seen as superior, blameless, or exceptional. Apologies in narcissistic dynamics often sound convincing but lack substance. They are vague, rushed, or conditional. I'm sorry you feel that way. I didn't mean it like that. I was just stressed. These statements are designed to end discomfort, not to acknowledge harm. There is no follow through, no behavioral change, and no repair, because true accountability would require admitting fault and tolerating shame. Over time, this pattern trains others to stop speaking up. If every attempt at resolution turns into conflict, gaslighting, or emotional punishment, people learn that honesty costs too much. The narcissist remains unchallenged while others carry resentment, confusion, and self-doubt. This imbalance is not accidental. It preserves the narcissist's sense of control and avoids the vulnerability that accountability demands. Lack of accountability also creates a double standard. The narcissist expects immediate forgiveness, understanding, and patience for their mistakes, but offers none in return. Your missteps are remembered, exaggerated, and weaponized, while theirs are minimized, forgotten, or justified. This imbalance reinforces their position of moral authority even when their behavior is clearly harmful. What makes this pattern so destabilizing is that it often coexists with charm and apparent self-awareness. The narcissist may talk about growth, insight, or healing, yet when confronted with real accountability, they collapse into defensiveness. This creates cognitive dissonance for those around them. You start questioning your perception because their words suggest responsibility while their actions show avoidance. Living with someone who lacks accountability means living in unresolved reality. There is no closure, no repair, no mutual understanding, only repetition. The same wounds reopen because nothing is ever addressed at the root. And the longer this pattern continues, the more exhausted and self-silencing others become, trying to preserve peace at the cost of their own emotional truth. Emotional invalidation is one of the most corrosive narcissistic behaviors because it targets a person's internal world rather than their external actions. A narcissistic individual does not simply disagree with your feelings, they dismiss them, undermine them, or redefine them in ways that serve their comfort. When emotions are expressed that challenge their self-image or authority, those emotions are treated as inconvenient, exaggerated, or wrong. This pattern often begins subtly. You share hurt and are told you are too sensitive. You express concern and are labeled negative, dramatic, or ungrateful. Over time, these responses condition you to question your own emotional responses. You begin editing yourself, choosing silence over expression, because every feeling becomes a potential conflict. Emotional invalidation works not through overt cruelty, but through repetition and dismissal. For narcissistic individuals, emotions are acceptable only when they align with their needs. If you are happy, proud, or admiring, they are comfortable. If you are sad, angry, or disappointed, they become defensive, annoyed, or dismissive. This selective tolerance creates an emotional hierarchy where their feelings are prioritized and yours are tolerated only when they are convenient. Invalidation also serves a control function. By denying the legitimacy of your emotions, the narcissist positions themselves as the authority on reality. They decide what is reasonable, what is excessive, and what deserves attention. This erodes emotional autonomy and increases dependency. You may start seeking their approval, even for how you feel, believing they know better than you. This behavior is especially damaging because emotions are signals. They inform us when boundaries are crossed or needs are unmet. When those signals are repeatedly dismissed, you lose trust in your internal guidance. This can lead to anxiety, numbness, and chronic self-doubt. You stop responding to red flags because you have been trained to believe your discomfort is the problem. Emotional invalidation often coexists with moments of apparent care or understanding, which makes it harder to identify. When the narcissist occasionally acknowledges your feelings, it creates hope and confusion. You focus on those moments and minimize the ongoing pattern. This intermittent validation keeps you emotionally invested despite the harm. Over time, emotional invalidation reshapes relationships into one-sided emotional labor. You work to manage their reactions while suppressing your own needs. The narcissist remains comfortable while you carry the emotional burden. This imbalance is not about misunderstanding, it is about power. And the longer it continues, the more disconnected you become from your authentic emotional experience and sense of self. Reality manipulation is one of the most destabilizing narcissistic behaviors because it interferes with a person's ability to trust their own perception. A narcissistic individual cannot tolerate information that threatens their self-image, so instead of integrating the truth, they reshape it. This is not occasional denial or forgetfulness. It is a consistent pattern of rewriting events, minimizing facts, and controlling narratives to preserve a sense of superiority or innocence. This manipulation often appears as gaslighting, where the narcissist denies things that were clearly said or done. You may remember conversations, incidents, or promises vividly, yet they insist it never happened or that you misunderstood. Over time, this creates confusion and self-doubt. You start questioning your memory, your judgment, and even your sanity because the person presenting the alternative version appears confident and certain. Selective memory is another common tactic. Positive actions that support their self-image are remembered in detail, while harmful behaviors are conveniently forgotten. When confronted, they may claim they do not recall the event or accuse you of exaggeration. This allows them to avoid responsibility while positioning you as unreliable or emotional. The narrative shifts from their behavior to your supposed instability. Reality manipulation also includes reframing harmful actions as jokes, misunderstandings, or acts of love. If you are hurt, you are told you took it the wrong way or that their intention was good. Intention is used as a shield to invalidate impact. This keeps the narcissist protected while the emotional consequences are pushed onto you. Over time, the goal becomes control of the shared reality. If the narcissist defines what is true, then they maintain power. This dynamic leaves others constantly explaining, justifying, and defending their experiences while the narcissist remains unchallenged. The imbalance grows because one person's version of reality is treated as fact while the other's is dismissed. This behavior is particularly damaging in close relationships where trust is essential. When reality is unstable, emotional safety disappears. You become hypervigilant, analyzing conversations and replaying events, trying to determine what is real. The mental energy required to stay oriented is exhausting and erodes self-confidence. Reality manipulation also isolates. You may hesitate to talk to others because you are unsure how to explain what is happening or fear being seen as dramatic. The narcissist benefits from this isolation because it reduces external validation of your experience. When reality is repeatedly distorted, the damage is not just confusion, but identity erosion. You lose confidence in your thoughts, your emotions, and your perceptions. This is why reality manipulation is not simply lying. It is a psychological strategy that destabilizes others to protect the narcissist's fragile self-image. Selective empathy is a defining narcissistic pattern because it creates the illusion of care without the substance of emotional responsibility. A narcissistic individual is not entirely devoid of empathy, but their empathy is conditional, strategic, and self-serving. They can appear deeply understanding in moments that benefit their image or secure admiration, yet become cold, dismissive, or irritated when empathy would require effort, accountability, or discomfort. This selective empathy often emerges early in relationships. The narcissist may mirror your pain, listen intently, and offer words that feel validating. This creates rapid emotional bonding and a sense of being seen. But over time, the empathy fades, especially when your needs become repetitive, complex, or inconvenient. The shift is subtle enough that you may blame yourself rather than recognize the pattern. Empathy for a narcissistic individual is often performative. It is expressed when others are watching or when it enhances their self-image as caring, generous, or emotionally intelligent. In private moments where no external reward exists, empathy becomes scarce. Your distress may be met with impatience, silence, or minimization. The contrast between public warmth and private indifference is deeply confusing. What makes this behavior especially harmful is that selective empathy conditions people to earn care. You may start believing that if you express yourself better, stay calmer, or ask less, you will receive understanding. This belief keeps you emotionally invested and self-correcting, while the narcissist avoids genuine emotional engagement. Selective empathy also reinforces power imbalance. The narcissist decides when compassion is given and when it is withheld. This creates emotional dependency because relief comes intermittently. You cling to moments of kindness and discount periods of neglect. This intermittent reinforcement is psychologically binding and difficult to leave. This pattern also allows narcissists to avoid accountability. They can point to moments of empathy as proof of goodness while dismissing the harm caused in moments of absence. The narrative becomes, look at how much I care rather than look at the pattern of neglect. This selective focus protects their self-image and invalidates your lived experience. Over time, selective empathy erodes trust in relationships. You stop expecting consistent emotional support and learn to manage your pain alone. The relationship becomes one-sided where your role is to accommodate and regulate while theirs is to receive affirmation. Understanding selective empathy clarifies why narcissistic relationships feel so confusing. It is not that empathy is missing entirely, it is that it is controlled, rationed, and used as a tool rather than a bridge. And when empathy becomes conditional, it stops being empathy and becomes manipulation. One of the most important truths about narcissistic behavior is that it follows patterns rather than appearing as isolated incidents. This distinction is critical because occasional mistakes happen in every relationship, but patterns reveal character. A narcissistic individual may point to moments of kindness, generosity, or self awareness as evidence that the problem is temporary or misunderstood. Yet, when behavior is viewed over time, the same dynamics repeat regardless of promises, apologies, or intentions. Patterns create predictability. The same conflicts arise, the same excuses are offered, and the same outcomes occur, even if the details change. This repetition is not coincidence. It reflects an entrenched way of relating to others that prioritizes self protection and control over mutual growth. When someone consistently avoids accountability, invalidates emotions, manipulates reality, and withholds empathy, these are not situational responses. They are structural traits. Narcissistic patterns often escalate rather than resolve. Early red flags may feel minor or confusing, but as time passes, the behaviors intensify, especially when the narcissist feels challenged or threatened. What once appeared as occasional defensiveness becomes chronic blame shifting. What seemed like insensitivity becomes systematic invalidation. This progression reveals that the issue was never circumstantial, but foundational. A key feature of narcissistic patterns is resistance to change. Narcissists may promise improvement when faced with consequences, but the underlying behavior remains intact. Change would require sustained self reflection, empathy, and accountability qualities that threaten their self image. Without internal motivation, any change is temporary, performative, or strategic. The pattern always returns once external pressure fades. Recognizing patterns also explains why people stay stuck for so long. Hope is fueled by isolated good moments. These moments are real, but they do not outweigh the dominant pattern. The nervous system remembers relief and clings to it while minimizing harm. This keeps people trapped in cycles of confusion, self doubt, and emotional exhaustion.